Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Chase, and joining me today is JJ Collier. You've been to so many brands. I don't want to belabor the bio, but I want to do it justice at the same time. You've professional athlete, snowboard athlete. Spent time at Salomon, Spyder, VF, and now have really charted your own course and building Collier Brands, helping brands with a number of services that we can get into, but appreciate you jumping on and taking some time to chat today.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to mention who brought us together. In a previous episode, we had Kyle Snar, and we talked a little bit about his background, his journey into the industry, and Kyle's a family friend. I don't know if you listened to that episode, but
I did, yeah.
Yeah, kind of fun connection there. We were able to reconnect and just talk about his pathway into the industry, and he brought us together. So I'm glad that he was willing to do that, and we've been able to have some good conversations. But wanted to dive into your journey into the industry because of all the people that we've talked to, we really haven't talked to anyone. Well, no one has the same pathway, right?
Right.
But we really haven't talked to anyone that's kind of gone through the journey that you have. Starting really on the, as a professional athlete, getting acquainted with the gear, using the gear to its extreme, and then transitioning into design. And then, going that path, working for different brands, major brands, having major influence there, and then kind of, again, charting your own course and starting your own thing. So I thought it's an interesting story, to say the least, and we haven't had anyone else who's really gone down that path. So I wanted to dive into some of that with you today.
I'm ready.
Well, to start, I just want to know a little bit more about your introduction to the outdoor industry. Like, what was your first introduction?
Oh boy, first introduction. That's great. Well, I'm from a very small town in North Carolina, up in the western mountains up by Asheville and Boone, and a little place called Banner Elk. I guess my first introduction to the outdoor industry was a shop called Edge of the World, which was in our town. Really started by a local family, really neat shop. It was my first introduction. It's so funny, at the time they were doing a bunch of cross-country skiing stuff, because we had these small resorts in my town, but we had all kinds of open land and plenty of places to go and cross-country ski. So they were, that was my first introduction to Patagonia and Chenard and Varney's, like a shop that actually had cool gear in our town was a big deal. And later on they became, after I sort of started snowboarding and started to spread the word about that, and, I wasn't the first, but in my little circle of friends, my brother and I were, sort of the first to get on that train, and eventually wound up talking Greg, the owner of Edge, into getting on board, and for years after, Edge of the World wasn't just Burton's biggest dealer in the Southeast. I think they were certainly the largest East Coast dealer, and Edge was one of the most important shops for a long time. So it's funny, I've never been asked that question, but Edge was certainly part of my intro.
Well, it's interesting the impact that some of these, all of the retailers have, right, on introducing people to. Well, was that your introduction to boards?
No.
Okay, you had a history beforehand.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They were an outdoor shop. They were doing rafting and canoeing in the summer and cross-country tours in the winter. I mean, we're talking way back here. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
This is like, I got my first real board in '86,
Okay.
So the following year, I'm like, Greg, you got to get on this.
Okay.
And,
so you introduced them to that. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly feel like I did. And Greg has been kind of to back that story up over the years, because it transformed their business. It sort of in some way transformed the town. Edge of the World wound up becoming quite a destination for our little town. You couldn't go up to the mountains without sort of dropping by Edge to talk to the team and see the latest stuff. And, it was an epicenter for fun, in Banner Elk. It was really cool.
Well, it's interesting that really just some of these movers, right? People, the early adopters, can make such an impact, like yourself, right? Like introducing, the sport, or, really pushing for them to carry the product, the ripple effects that can have, right? And how many other people got introduced to the sport because that, they started carrying the product. And just interesting to think about the ripple effects. And again, in the age that we live in now, right? Especially now, like specialty retail, it's kind of going through a lot, to say the least. But I just think back on, we did one of these history of gear episodes on some of the hubs, the hotspots of gear around the country, and the individual that I was talking with, who's kind of a historian of the outdoor industry, we talked about Arcata, California, and that was just a part of the country I wasn't really on my radar, and certainly not for gear history. And he talked about how there's this one outdoor retailer that really sparked the outdoor industry there, and it was called the Arcata Transit Authority. It was like a bike
Okay.
shop that started
Right.
carrying other products, and because they started carrying product, you started seeing more people get into outdoor sports, and then from there, people started making their own gear, and there's kind of this snowball effect that happens once you introduce gear into a community, right?
Yeah.
Once people start using it, then they start figuring out what's wrong with it and how they could make it better, which is, I wonder if that had an effect on you when you really got into the sport professionally. I guess we can talk a little bit about that. How did you get into the professional side of things? And then I want to touch on, like, how does that impact how you look at products?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, we started very young. Within a couple of years, the second year I was snowboarding, I don't know how, but I managed to talk my dad into driving my brother and I to Vermont to the U.S. Open, which it's not at Stratton anymore, but it's still the biggest single snowboard event of the year. And anyway, back then, kids from North Carolina show up, and everyone else is from Oregon and California and Colorado and Vermont and everywhere else. Nobody even knew we had snowboarding or mountains, resorts down there. And I won the junior moguls, and I'm a junior in high school, and I'm sponsored by Burton and Oakley, and like this dream just exploded on my life with, kind of without warning. I knew I could ride. I didn't expect to go up there and win, I've been snowboarding for 2 years. So that happened. Finished high school with this dream of moved to Breckenridge, rode the amateur tour for a couple of years, won it both times, and decided to turn pro in '92. And to keep it short, rode the pro tour for many years, had a couple more podiums at the US Open, and just had a fantastic time kind of on really the first wave of snowboarding really starting to happen. There was a wave of pros before sort of my crew, and we looked up to those guys. They were the pioneers, Terry Kidwell and Craig Kelly and all those guys. But like, we got to ride the first big wave of like, okay, X Games, Olympics, they're actually being prize money above 3 figures, stuff like that. It's a total blast. But yeah, in that time, I'm like, I'm living in this product every day, right? You know what works, what's garbage, how long things are going to last after a while, and so, yeah, so you just develop this inherent understanding of functional product, and you understand the weak points, and, you understand what's fluff and what you actually use every day. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of that. Oh, so-and-so is doing something, so we better do it. Me too, garbage, that isn't always meaningful. And so, yeah, so it certainly shaped my capability long before I knew I wanted to be a designer, But there was a secondary thing of like kind of having had my eyes opened to the world, with a bit of travel and like international riders and athletes, and like, it opened my awareness more than I realized sort of at the time, So I'm in the pro tour. I'm 26, 27 years old. The 17-year-olds are coming up, and I'm like, this is going to get ugly. I don't want to be the old guy at the club, like I need to get out of here and figure out what's next for me. And so that's right around the time that I bought my sewing machine. It was 97, which I love. It sounds like the dark ages, I know, but important to me. So like, I was heading out for my last pro tour year, bought my sewing machine. My girlfriend, now wife of 22 years, whatever, was like, all right, he's going for it. This is different. I didn't see a sewing machine coming, and brought it with me out west, and when my roommates are playing PlayStation, or, when we're done in the half pipe, I didn't come home and sit on the couch. I came home and started trying to figure out turn a seam properly, and what a good neckline looks like, and so on. Totally knew nothing. Just started cutting fabric and putting stuff together. Didn't even know enough at the time in retrospect to like cut up a t-shirt and get a good armhole, like all of that stuff. I just started making stuff. And so that was sort of that was the transition. I think you have other questions. I don't want to give the whole thing on one answer, but that was the sort of the transition. I'm like, all right, I've got a couple of years left of this while I have the time to do it, while there's some money, and prize money and pay from my sponsors, in the later years. I got to use this time. So that's when I started selling.
Well, it's an interesting dilemma that a lot of athletes face, right? And there's not a clear direction as to, well, what do you do afterwards, right? It's like,
yeah.
Well, like getting in and doing it professionally it seems like that's the pinnacle, right? That's the peak. Like you made it. But it's a short, there's a short window, right? Whatever sport it is, right? It's some
or you get
shorter
hurt,
than others, right?
Yeah.
Or you get hurt, right? And it's all over, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, and sports like, I think snow sports, like as opposed to, the NBA, right? It's like, okay, there's a lot more money involved in some of these other sports, right? Okay, maybe you can do that and bank on that for the rest of your life. And just there's other sports that maybe don't have that, that it's not that same level, not to diminish, snow sports at all. It's just different dynamics, different economics, right?
Well, there were no millionaires at the time. I
Right.
mean, that's the thing. Like there were a couple of guys pulling a pretty good salary, from endorsements and certainly prize money to some extent. But this was way before Shaun White.
Right.
In a good, I don't know, 10 years maybe before it really, really started to blow up and corporate sponsors started coming on, and you had millionaires.
So. Right. So it's interesting that were other people at the same time, other athletes thinking like you were? It's like, what am I going to do next? What's after this? Or are you too busy, caught in the moment? Just
no, definitely. There were a few, like one of my best, one of my regular travel partners and good friends, Frank Wells. It normally came down to 3 or 4 of us getting on the same flight, renting a car, and having a total blast, so between like Frank Wells and JJ Thomas, who went on to be an Olympian, like Frank has gone on to be like the premier half pipe cutter in the world. So he cuts X Games, he cuts everything. And as I was starting to pick up my sewing machine, he was like at Mount Hood learning how to cut the first 20-foot half pipes, before the machines could do it. He was like, this is where it's going. People are going to want to go 20 feet. We were going 10 feet out of a 10-foot pipe, or 4 feet out of a 6-foot pipe, like it was changing before our very eyes. And so Frank was really ahead of that.
That's interesting.
I believe JJ has gone on to be like Shaun White's coach and stuff. I might be misquoting, but I'm pretty sure that's what JJ's been up to. So yeah, there were a number of people who are not, I don't know what people were thinking, but I know that the folks in my circle, I could tell who was sort of, figuring how they could turn this into something meaningful.
Right. Did you have any distinct moment where you realized you probably had this experience because you were working with the brands. You probably did you ever get into did you ever have the experience of working with brands on developing new product for you? Or what was that relationship like? And did that open your eyes to, oh, people actually make this stuff? I guess what was that first moment for you when you recognized, oh, people get paid to make this stuff, and that's something that I could do?
Yeah. No, I suppose I knew that. I had been a bit of a student from a very young age. Like I saw things I wanted. I knew there were things I wanted, like when I saw my first Porsche 911 at 10 years old or whatever, I'm like, okay, it wasn't a Corvette, it wasn't a Ferrari, it was a 911, and there was something inherent about that I know now really triggered me and really shaped my approach to product. Ralph Lauren ads, at 11 or 12 years old, I was starting to get this idea. Oh, is that what life looks like outside of Banner Elk? I want a piece of that, It's imaginary, but it looked possible, And so I knew that there was good work being done out in the world. I know now that it was as plain as day that I wanted to be in this industry, because I look back on some of the feedback I was doing, like I wrote for Spyder as an athlete in the early 90s, and I look at the drawings that I did to provide athlete feedback was not what they were getting from other athletes. It's just, I know that for sure. The detail was just ridiculous and off the charts, and in color with zoom views and stuff, all by hand. It was so obvious. But it didn't occur to me that maybe I wanted to be a designer until a little bit later. And for what it's worth, it was always fashion. I didn't want to be in the ski or snowboard industry at all. I wanted to go and be Ralph, And so that's why it's kind of funny that my snowboard career and all of this stuff wound up kind of circling around and actually bringing me back into technical outerwear, ski and snowboard.
Well, I asked that question because a lot of people go through life not really recognizing that everything in this world is designed, right? Like there's some intention that goes behind, all the products that are around us and the environments that are around us, everything, right? And I like sharing a story of one of our students, and how she discovered product design as she was hiking. I don't remember which trail it was, but she was just staring at the person's backpack in front of her for hours on end, right, on this long trail. And that's when she recognized like all the details and the thought goes into the product. And that's when she recognized, I want to do that. Like people do that and get paid. So I have to ask, what that experience was for each of my guests who are designers. So it's always interesting to see, what was that moment for other people.
Oh, sorry, Chase, real quick. What's funny, there were a couple of instances too later in my career where it's like I would try to provide some feedback, and you might get something like, it's cool, we've got designers for that, And it's funny too how much that has changed. Like Spyder was receptive to athlete feedback, and in at least one other instance, it was like, no, we've got designers for that, and I get it. They were paying designers a lot to do quote that. But it's so funny too how much athlete feedback and like real end user feedback from the field has impacted the brands that have that embrace that, and you can see how successful they are from that. Pairing great designers with like really great end users sounds obvious now, but that wasn't always the case.
Right. Well, participatory design, right, is kind of the norm now. It's like, oh, well, we need to bring the user in from the beginning, right? And if that user is an athlete or just, your everyday user, it's like, no, we need them to be an active participant in the creation of this product. It can't just be us in a room, in a vacuum creating what we think is cool. We have to have, the people who are actually going to be using it actively involved.
Well, and the latter, I think, even more so. Like you're absolutely right. It's one thing to design for ninjas, who are the best in the world at everything, at their thing. It's another thing to really think about how that actually does trickle down to a real world end user. Like, are you solving problems for the people that are going to buy this as opposed to the people who are going to be given it? Is an interesting parallel.
Well, it's a challenge that the industry faces, right? Because we want to make the best of the best product for those people who are, pushing the limits. But let's face it, most people aren't going to be using product to push the limits. They're going to use it to go out and get the mail, or, just go out and go on a walk, or, that's the definition of what is outdoor, I think, is expand in a really good way to be even more inclusive, right? Of more activities. It's not always about, being the best or tackling, this, climbing the highest peak or whatever it might be. But I guess what are some of your thoughts on that? Where you come from a background of performance and pushing things to the limits, how has that influenced you from a design perspective? I could see it being, you getting a little lost in, okay, I don't know. Did you ever find yourself getting caught in a bubble, right? It's like, I'm creating for these pinnacle athletes. Do you ever find yourself having to ground yourself and pull yourself back and recognize, okay, not everyone is striving for what I'm striving for? Does that make sense?
That's a great question. I think, I don't know I don't think I've ever got lost in it. I think if anything, I start from a place of like, authenticity always, but wanting to provide the best possible experience to whoever I believe to be the end user to be, or whoever I've been briefed the end user is. And yeah, of course we want to always build the Formula One stuff, and there's a place for that, and I love it. Who doesn't love that? But it's in some ways more challenging to find ways to bring the best possible stuff to more people,
Hmm.
and to have that be a little bit more affordable and have that be more accessible. And nowadays have that be more sustainable, like to be more consciously created. I don't just want to say designed, because it's not just design, as you know, it goes all the way down the supply chain. So I don't think I've ever gotten lost in it. I do joke from time to time about being the worst possible person to ask about this, end quotes, and having to remind people around me, well, wait a second, let's make sure we're thinking about this not from the perspective of tier one snobbery, but from the perspective of like, how are we going to make this happen for real people? So I don't think I get lost in it, but that's a question I'll be thinking about after we're off the call.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a question that we try to challenge our students with, right? It's like, you can't design for yourself, right? It's like, you have to be designing for other people, and when you go and work in the industry, you're not getting paid to make stuff that you necessarily think is cool, all the time, right? Like, obviously you're being brought into a company because of skill sets you have and perspective, but it's not every day that you get to sit down and say, well, I think this kind of a jacket is really cool, so I'm going to make it. There's so much more that goes into it than that.
Yeah, well,
Um,
and especially not in the beginning. I mean, just to
mhm.
clarify that one, that's a big one. When I'm like sitting with young people, I'm like, I try to remind them in the nicest possible way that at first, you may not have the voice in the way that maybe you hoped you would, or that you can eventually, or maybe that you had in school. You might be the sort of the ninja in your peer group at school, and then come out and realize, hopefully for you, that you know how much you don't know, and so that you can have this incredible experience out in the field. Um, but you said this. Eventually, however, hopefully you've been hired because someone sees a spark in you, and hopefully you're able to like keep that thing under control while you come up through the ranks, and while you sort of become a known quantity inside a brand. And that's when all of a sudden you realize people are looking up from their phones when you speak in a meeting or whatever, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm finding my way through here. Like, people care about what I have to say, or more importantly, what you have to show, because
Mm.
when you start doing reviews, or when your stuff's on the wall and it's your time to pitch, like, that's when you really get a chance to, to sort of close the deal. But it doesn't necessarily happen. It happens more in smaller brands, but historically there's a minute there where you're a support person, and you build respect and trust that way first, with the ensconced team, and then you find your way up. I've seen it happen that way many times. It's great.
Right. Well, it seems like in the beginning, it's okay. Can you deliver? Do you have the technical skill to just get the job done? Right. Can
Yeah,
you just
totally.
deliver on time? Right.
Yeah,
And then it seems like you're rewarded later on for the ideas, right? And how much can you push things forward, and how much can you think outside of the box? So it's having that bare minimum of, okay, do I have the technical skill to deliver? But later on, it seems like what really pays off is, how you think, right? How you solve real
yeah.
problems.
I think that's very well put. Yeah,
So yeah, that's something that we always try to preach for the students is you got to have both. You got to, have those technical skills, but you got to, have a process, right? And you've got to be able to communicate that process to other people, and you've got to be passionate about making stuff that matters. And I want to get into that later on, right? And how you've, uh, uh, you know, maybe pushed yourself to work on stuff that actually needs to exist and not just make more things. But
yeah.
yeah, I want to go back a little bit to touch on how you even broke in. So we're going to take a step back. You got a sewing machine. You're just making stuff in your apartment or home at the time. What was the next step, right? Where did you go from there?
Well, the next step was thinking it was time to leave snowboarding and go back to school. I don't think Shannon and I were engaged yet, to me, and I'm trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to go forward into the world as an adult. So I essentially left snowboarding, moved back to the East Coast, attempted to go back to school for like 10 minutes, and I was like, no, this is never going to happen at my age, and the amount of time it's going to take, and I don't even know what I really want, from it. Like, what do I want from said degree? So that was kind of the challenge at the time. It's like, I've been used to like just sort of pulling up my bootstraps and doing what needed to be done, as opposed to like following a traditional path. And here I was thinking that I needed that, and knowing that at least at my age, that wasn't the investment that I needed to make. I had been learning how to make things, um, I believed I could tell a story. And so we just sort of, I told Shannon I wanted to, I wanted to stop everything, build a collection, have a fashion show, and launch my own brand. And it all went to plan. I mean, here I am, a self-taught sewer on a home sewing machine, built like 35 pieces, got some friends from my little part-time job at J. Crew, still working retail. And I was like, all right, guys, who wants to be a model,
Hmm.
And like, anyway, I held this fashion show, got a little bit of press afterwards, which was great. But I mean, the next day the key thing, Chase, was the next day I considered myself a designer. Like I
Hmm.
went to bed after the fashion show and I woke up the next day and I wasn't JJ the snowboarder anymore. At least as far as I was concerned, I was JJ the designer, and the phone started to ring a little bit. People started to come to me with, trying to solve unique problems, or maybe they had an idea or whatever. So I was able to like sit down, draw a picture of this person, talk them through that drawing, show them kind of what they were going to look like as I saw it. And in most cases, they were like, yeah, let's do this. And so all of a sudden I was, building stuff by hand for one-offs for individuals.
How were people finding you at the time?
The newspaper, I mean, like,
Hmm.
it's so funny. It was like, this was like, this wasn't like I got on the news, I got on the newspaper, like, and so people were just finding me, I think, in the telephone book. In fact, I know they were, because there was another John Collier. I was kind of going by John Collier, and had sort of tried to drop the JJ moniker, which was silly in retrospect. But yeah, no, and then the phone book, man,
Hmm.
it's crazy.
Well, what
It's crazy.
and so from there, I guess for you, I think that mindset. I'm glad that you brought up mindset, because how did you feel about your technical abilities, right? Because I think that we think a lot about designers as being able to create really beautiful, polished renderings and beautiful hand sketching. And how did you feel about those abilities, and how much of it was just purely the mindset that really got you through and helped you push through?
I'm exactly the same way I am now, blindly confident in my capability and super insecure.
Hmm.
I mean, this is like, I don't know if that ever changes. It's like, I knew I could sew a pair of pants together. I knew I could make a tailored shirt. I certainly knew I could draw. I was, horribly concerned about hitting a brick wall or this not working, and like, I had a lot of eggs in that basket. And I mean, I hate to start a sentence with "if you're smart," but I should say I believe that that's the only way to be. Like, you know what I mean? I just, arrogance comes before the fall. Like, I don't believe in, I don't ever think I'm bulletproof. Oh, I got this. It's no way. And that's what happened to our industry. I think a lot of people were like, oh, so we'll continue to grow every year forever. And
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, sure you will. So I always stay nervous. I'm always looking, the parallel I'll draw is on the racetrack, or on the mountain. Like, if you're looking down at what's right in front of you, and not anticipating the next roller or the next shady spot where it's going to be icy, or looking ahead to an elevation in the track. I have a vintage Porsche that I finally did get one, and so now I drive it as hard as I can, as often as I can. But if there's an elevation in the track where the car is going to get light, and you're in the middle of a turn, you're in trouble. And if you weren't looking and anticipating and planning, then you'll find yourself upside down or in the trees. So I'm a firm believer in keeping that balance. But at the time, the mindset was absolutely critical. In some way, I felt like I had no choice. This had to work. I was not going to go back to school. This was my dream. I believed I could help improve people's lives in some way. And so I just kept on figuring it out.
Well, along those lines, I need to get this saying down, because I bring it up so often, but it's that perfect is the enemy of done or
Of good,
good.
of
Yeah, is it
good.
good?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
Um,
great expression.
is
Yeah.
that something that you find yourself fighting? I see it in our students as well. It's, oh well, my sketches don't look good, so I'm just not going to do it. Right? It's like,
Mm.
well, of course they're not going to look good if you don't practice, right? And there's this fear of putting yourself out there and just and taking the first step is that sounds like along the lines of what you just said, right? It's like you got to push through some of those feelings. There's got to be something that helps get you through that. Is that kind of along the lines of what you were just
Oh,
saying?
I mean, for sure. I have people in my life who would, one of my good buddies who's always busting my chops because it's like, dude, you haven't launched your own brand because you never think it's good enough. Like it's never going to be good enough for you to put your name on it. And I'm like, well, to some extent, that is one place definitely where perfect has gotten in the way of good, just because I don't feel like I've cracked the code. And
Mm,
even more in the last 5 years when it's like, so much good product in the world. So we don't just need another great, like, what workwear, pair of workwear pants with a different label on it. The only reason I'm going to launch something, not that I want a workwear brand, but but the only reason I want to do anything anymore is if there's an absolute new approach, new solution, new everything, because old is old. Like, and there's no point. I mean, and for the brands I'm working with, it's like, it's so funny, Chase. I'm a design consultant, and I find myself sometimes suggesting that people don't do it. It's
mm,
like, and in some cases I've said, no, you got a great idea, go for it. But I feel this desire sometimes to be like, or not, don't do it unless dot dot dot,
mm.
and let's find out what the unless is together. Because if you don't know what the unless is, then like, don't throw money at this. There's too much good product in the world um,
Right.
to go head to head with the big players. Whether that's Patagonia or your Uniqlo, don't just do another down puffer unless you've got a damn good reason to be here and you can tell a genuinely unique news story about why that puffer is here. You
Right.
know,
Yeah, that's the challenge of training a next generation of product design students, right? It's like we're trying to instill that in them, is this idea of, well, we don't need more stuff. We've got plenty of stuff in the world. Like, how do you bring something new to the table, and think deeper? And that's the challenge for a lot of them. And maybe you've gone through this crisis too, where you realize, oh, I'm just making more stuff and it's not impactful, and I'm contributing to the problem by making more of this stuff. We've had plenty of students who go through that crisis of, oh, do I really just want to make more things
mhm.
that go against my values? And a lot of them work through that. But have you found yourself, fighting that routinely? It sounds like you're able to pick your battles a little bit more now, where you can really choose what you want to work on and choose the things that align with your values more. But is that something that I imagine with the different brands that you worked with, it's probably something that you had to fight against, and sometimes you probably had to compromise on some things. But what was that experience
Yeah, I
like
mean,
for
I've
you?
definitely, I'm here on my soapbox talking like a proper idealist, I know, but in theory, that's what we should try to chase, right?
Sure.
Um, I've been fortunate, and I think your students will find the same. Like people are always going to want things. It's not like we want to just stop making stuff. We have a
Hmm.
responsibility to make great things, and like you said, make things that matter. That's been one of my hashtags lately, especially as it pertains to some of my personal projects. But like, um, no, we just I've been fortunate, and I think, like I said, your students will be working for some of the brands where they've been placed to make lasting things that people will love. Like, we're talking, I'm doing a lot of talking on sustainability right now, and it's Pandora's box, and it's a giant topic. But at the very least, we need to make things that are quality and things that last a long time. Keep them in service. I'm skipping 8 steps, but after lasting things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, make repairs cool again.
Hmm.
Let's not throw things away just because they got a hole in them. Let's find a cool way to repair them, and remind people that patina and repairs are actually cool. There's a taste level associated with that. Um, these are big theories we can talk about in more detail, but the idea is that hopefully we're building things that people love and really appreciate and wear for a long time, and hopefully in some cases give to another family member someday, like their heirloom type of quality. That's how I feel about a lot of the triple lot design stuff. It's like it's going to last a long time.
Right. Well, that's one of those qualities that the extreme outdoor users have espoused for a long time, right? It's like, I love this, piece of gear, and so I'm going to repair it or retreat it, or um, you know, d- do whatever it takes because I've been through wars in it, right? It's got
Yeah,
the battle scars that I've
exactly.
repaired. It tells a story. When you meet up with your friends, you can talk about all the climbs that you did, whatever it is. That's one of those things that needs to trickle out more into to the casual user, right? Those of us who maybe see product as more disposable than it should be. And I think we're starting to see that, right? And brands like like Patagonia, and I know the North Face is really pushing some of this. I don't remember what their upcycle program is called, but there's definitely a lot more of that, and this emphasis on repair. And it seems like, certain consumers are more focused on that too. How do I make this thing my own? Like, how do I rework this product? It's a conversation that I had with Nicole McLaughlin, who's really blown up for her unique takes on footwear, like upcycling really trash and other items into footwear. But it's this weird dichotomy, right? Of, okay, people want brands and they want to associate themselves with brands and be a part of that and have that be attached to that, be a part of that tribe, but they also want something that's entirely unique. So they want the brand, but they want to reimagine it in a way that no one else has that kind of a product. So it's interesting to see some of those things come to light. I'm sure that's something that you're seeing a lot of as well in your work, or hopefully we're moving that direction. It certainly seems that way.
I think so. Yeah, and I think the education piece, here again, when we're close to it and we design this product and we think about it constantly, and we can you name 40 brands, and 40 designers, and you have a very distinct point of view on style and all that stuff. I think that is one place where I have certainly not gotten lost. And instead, I'm so acutely aware of how much other people aren't like that, that I do spend a lot of time thinking on the education piece, and in terms of like awareness, and raising awareness. It's like, not everyone thinks about trying to make something specifically their own. In many cases, they open a catalog or open a website and go, oh yeah, that looks right. Or that's what I was looking for somebody else, and they buy an item as opposed to necessarily always thinking about building a wardrobe or building a kit. And so I think there's a huge opportunity there for helping remove the guesswork, is something you'll always hear me say for people, where it's like, how do we make it understandable and fun and like desirable in the bigger picture, not just as an item, but like, how does this contribute to the rest of what I already have? How am I more stylish or more capable because of this particular item?
Right. Yeah. Well, it all goes back to intention, right? It's like just buying with intention, I think, I don't know how you push the public, or I can do that on my own, but how do you encourage or incentivize people to buy with intention? That's an individual journey, but something it seems like a lot of brands are trying to crack that, and some brands are doing better than others, but it seems like that's what it goes back to. It's these individual decisions that people have to make. Like I've really been focused a lot more on thrifting, right? It's like there's great product that, like you said, because it was made right, it's going to last a long time. So why do I need to go buy something new? I could go buy something, for a fraction of the price that, I feel this sense of pride in finding it and rescuing it in a way, and helping it live on. And it's a story that I can tell, and people kind of swap those stories of like, oh, I found this thing. And I don't know what that journey is for everyone, but it kind of seems like we all need, to make lasting impact, we kind of have to make decisions. We don't all have to thrift, but we have to be thinking more in those terms of, how do I buy with intention?
Well, and here again, we are in this, where we live this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're thinking thrifting. I think a lot of the brands, when I talk to people about sustainability and stuff, it's like one of the first things that we can talk about is the collection and then reselling of things. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we're sort of nerds about this. So yeah, thrifting, we get why thrifting is cool.
Yeah.
But the idea of collecting things and reselling them and keeping them in play, I think is definitely a big discussion being had by some of the larger brands right now, where it's sort of like, you see the parallel I'm drawing between knowing to thrift versus being told that, hey, check it out, this is an opportunity to buy this product again, or in some way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not really thrifting, it's just sort of reselling, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Well,
Totally.
it's a huge challenge, and I don't know how we necessarily solve it. There's no silver bullet. And in some ways, I feel like in some ways we can cause more problems. There's unintended consequences. I think back, and I don't know completely how to feel about the Patagonia "Don't buy this jacket" ad. Because at the same time, the message is really powerful, but I guarantee that sales of that jacket went up like crazy, right? and encouraged more buying, right? So it's, not to be overly critical necessarily of Patagonia in this case, but that's the challenge that I think the industry faces. And again, we're kind of, bringing up more problems, I guess, than solutions on this in this conversation. But maybe we should move on. I don't want people to get down thinking about
No
this.
worries.
I think there's
No,
a lot of
no,
opportunity.
no way. Are you kidding? This is opportunity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, this is an opportunity, and
Right.
this is our responsibility, not mine even. I mean, it is you guys, your students, your generation. Absolutely, your responsibility to do it better than we did, and because
Right.
because there's a generation of us that like I said was really trying to do the right thing, building meaningful, lasting stuff. And still now you start to learn a little bit more as you get older about kind of what's really happening in some cases, not in all cases. And it's like, okay, I'm in this for a long time left, but it's mine to fix. Like I'm part of the solution and part of drafting the way forward. But like I need all the ideas I can get, or we need all the ideas we can get as in this industry. And it's you guys have a tremendous opportunity to find new ways to do this that mean more, that means more to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't just want to have a stack of stuff on the table. Your generation is going to engage with the customer in a totally different way and have them and you have a totally different experience than I did. And trust me, it's going to be way more fun and way more engaging than, dropping a bunch of stuff and maybe never hearing about it again.
Right. Right.
You know?
Well, kind of a change of pace here, but I'm curious, how did you, again, kind of going back to your chronology,
Yeah.
how did you go from releasing your own collection to jumping into the industry in a formal way?
Yeah, so I'm sewing away on my little home sewing machine. I don't think I had started this woman's wedding dress and all the bridesmaids yet, which was completely nuts, by the way. I mean, I had believed in myself, but that was really pushing the limits of like risky projects to take on when you need money. But I was probably working on it. And the phone rang, and it's fall of '99, and it's a Swiss-German guy saying, "Hey, I'm from Salomon, and we are trying to launch apparel. In so many words, we haven't quite figured it out yet." If you guys all know Salomon, they'd done the monocoque ski. They'd had innovations in ski boots. Like, everything they did changed the paradigm a little bit, And 20 years ago, even in a crowded market, why did we need more apparel? So we were having to ask ourselves those questions then. What are we going to do to ski wear that's going to make it, give it a reason to be in this market right now? So anyway, they had not been able to figure that out. I took this call and I told him, that sounds like an awesome opportunity. Thanks. Anyway, I'm busy with my little fashion thing here. I mean, it was just hilarious, right? Talk about, maybe I was completely nuts, Chase. Maybe I was massively overconfident in my little dream I had at the time. But so I called Shannon. I was like, "Hey, I just had this great conversation with this guy." And she's like, "Would you mind maybe seeing if you can get that gig before you tell him thanks anyway?" So I called him back. I did a bunch of drawings. I flew to Boulder and interviewed at the Salomon Design Center and got the job. In retrospect, by some miracle. Except I was green as grass. I didn't know how to use Illustrator really. I'd screwed around on a little bit, but I really didn't know how to use it. I could use a little bit of Photoshop, but what I had was ideas and the ability to sell those ideas. And so they had heard about me as a snowboarder, and he called me up, and that was it. I was somehow able to be hired and then launch apparel for Salomon.
That was my next question. You kind of answered it, but how did they find you? It was mostly through the snowboarding side of things?
Yeah, there were a couple of people in my life, like one of their footwear guys I had grown up with. One of my top mentors was in the company. There was a woman from Spyder, a couple of women from Spyder who'd remembered me as an athlete. I mean, just one of those things where it was like, these were friends of mine and people who knew I had a different sort of fire. I think they also knew that, even if I was just sort of finding my stride as a designer, they knew that there was a lot of fire and energy and desire there, and there was.
I think I know the answer, but how important is networking? And what you were doing wasn't networking. You were just being a person, living life, interacting with people, and being a good person, and not burning bridges. And
Yeah.
so how important has that been for you? It's something I always try to hit home with our students. And sometimes it can feel really inauthentic, but the way you did it, I mean, it's just, you're just living your life and doing your thing and interacting with people. But how impactful has that been for you?
I think it's absolutely critical, but the world has changed so much now too that it's like it's not maybe not critical in quite the same way. Like the idea nowadays that very ambitious people are just gonna, like an aspiring designer just drops a note to the CEO of somebody on LinkedIn, of some brand on LinkedIn, is like,
Mhm.
hey, check out my stuff. It's like, okay, that's pretty bold, and I admire that. But like that's the world we live in now, where you of course you need to be a decent human. Like that's number one.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you get hired for your skill. You also get hired, speaking from the perspective of a hiring manager, for when you're someone that I can imagine working with. You
Mhm.
know, like you might be the most badass ninja on earth, but if I look at you and go, oh, prima donna vibes, not
Yeah.
interested, then forget it. Because it's an organism, it's never
Mhm.
about one person. It's like so you've got to be a good human. The networking thing's important, but now it's like there's so many channels to tell your story within, that for sure the human element's key, but you've got to be good at the channels as well.
Well, it seems like there's a lot more focus on what are you producing? What value do you create, right?
Yeah.
And I think of one industrial designer that's close with our program that he uses his Instagram as a living, breathing portfolio, and he creates content that draws people in, and people
Oh yeah.
recognize his value, and that's how if he ever needed a new job, I mean, he's got the built-in network, not because he
Totally.
went out seeking the network, but he just attracted people to him. So it seems like there's more of a focus on that, right? Drawing people into your orbit by
And
producing
also a
something,
fabulous
giving something away. So
in this case, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same person, but also a great human, also someone you would
yeah,
absolutely love to have in your org.
yeah,
So, but no, not, I didn't mean to take anything away from what you were saying. You're absolutely right. That's one of the best examples that I'm aware of right now of like um, a living thing and modern application of the tools and the desire, to be a known quantity.
well, networking can feel like it's take, right? It's like I'm in it to get something. Whereas I've always been of the mind that if you give something away, like things come back, right? Obviously you don't give, you know thinking that stuff will come back. If you do it that way, I think the intention is wrong and it feels inauthentic. But if you're giving away something of value, I'd have to believe a lot of that comes back in tenfold, and it might be long term. But that's with this individual in particular, I definitely see that, right? He's giving knowledge, he's giving value away, and it comes back in kind for him. So I that's kind of where I see things evolving, and something I try to really emphasize for our students, but had wondered how that had impacted you. I liked what you said. So it's just being a good human is really the bare minimum. It's not really something that we should talk about, but it's a given. But
Yeah. Well, and you want ninjas, right? I mean, you
yeah,
want awesome capability, but I'm just saying, like within an organization, or if I'm hiring a support person for my own business, it's like, is this going to be more work than it's worth?
right, right,
Um, and especially with young people just getting a start, it's very rare. I'm trying to think of any instance where I've seen someone who was so good that I just would put up with anything, kind of thing. And
yeah,
even then, as a manager, it would be irresponsible to introduce that element into other people's lives. So it's
right.
like, yeah, so there's definitely a delicate balance, but I mean, great capability has got to come along with being a good human. You don't just hire good humans.
Right. Yeah, that combination is the sweet spot. I try to tell the students, I do one presentation in the spring for all the juniors and seniors where I kind of talk to them about networking and how to break into the industry. And I just the one big point that I really try to hit home, kind of wrapping up what you said, is you just want to make your manager's life easier, right? Like think about life from their perspective, right? It's like all the things that they're juggling, all the people that they have to manage, all the timelines. Like if you can be the person that comes in, is great to work with, and you can make life easier for everybody else, Like, I think you're gonna be a valuable asset to the team, to the company. So as soon as you can think in those terms of like, how do I add value to the team? How do I add value to the company? How do I make everyone else's burden lighter? You're gonna be in a good position.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, just while we're here, I don't know if they'll listen or not, but I've had a number of examples of those types of people who are just amazing and just bring it every time, and they're super dependable, and even when times are tough, they'll rise to it, and they're good communicators, so they'll let you know too. You don't need yes people around. You need people who are part of that organism.
Right.
And yeah, when they're there, they're solid gold. You
Right.
just nothing means more to you as a manager than those kinds of people, and I've been lucky to have a lot of them.
Well, this has almost turned into a careers podcast. I hope you don't mind, but I've really enjoyed this. But I don't want to gloss over, the different steps you've taken along the way. It's hard to probably distill this down into, a couple minutes, but what was your experience like at Salomon versus Spyder, VF? It's hard to wrap all of that up into a short,
Yeah. I mean, I can make that very, very brief, because I think it is important to the audience when you think about this trajectory type of mentality or what happens. So like at Salomon, I'm hired at a higher level than I was, end of story. So that happened a little bit, just to like, I shouldn't say that. I probably had the skills of an assistant designer, but I was in a team where I could be a designer and got to really have a point of view. So it goes against a little bit of what I've been saying, where it's like very small team. This guy's got ideas, get to work. And I had good management who helped me past my shortcomings. Very shortly thereafter, I established myself from crazy mental hard work and, and attitude and personality, and being a part of the team and like believing in the whole thing, which is critical too, right? So Salomon turned into a senior designer thing over the course of 5 years. We moved to Europe. So we were operating out of Salomon headquarters in Annecy, France. Google it. And next time you go to Europe, go to Annecy.
I was supposed to take a trip out there this year, but
oh, dude.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, little Chamonix is like 50 minutes away too. So I mean, oh my God, go to that region. But anyway, so that was amazing. Phone rings at my desk, and it's a Ralph Lauren recruiter, telling me, hey, we've kind of been watching what Salomon's doing. The RLX team is hoping to sort of find a new stroke, for that product. There's a lot of things happening. I'm like, oh my God, why now? Like what a dumb thing to say on a podcast, but like, that's what went through my mind. I'm like, we just got to France. This brand has changed my life. I'm completely dedicated to it. I live and breathe Salomon, and my dream of all dreams, impossible thing, is coming calling. What, 2 years in or 3 years in, and so it was funny. So here again, I kind of had to say, you know what, guys, I'm busy right now. It was like crazy, but I couldn't abandon Salomon, and so I held them off for as long as I could. Took a few interviews, met some people, met Ralph, was completely blown away. Like this was my next thing for sure. And was having another conversation that came out of nowhere with a big brand from Vancouver too. So I had spent some time sitting on the hill in France trying to figure out what I wanted to do, New York or Vancouver, and chose to go work for my this hero of mine. And so senior designer at Salomon, small team, to answer your question. All of a sudden, boom, Ralph Lauren, design director for outerwear, surrounded by unbelievably talented people, and in some cases wind up managing people who are, extremely talented, highly educated, and so how grateful I was to be able to hang in that environment, and not just hang, but like make a really genuine contribution during those years. It was just out of this world, but a totally different organization, big company, small team, getting some time with Ralph, which was always just solid gold, getting a massive education in fit and finishing, and, working in a New York environment where expectations were just off the charts, and I showed up, kind of to our earlier discussion, thinking I knew something and knowing things, having good skills, but holy moly, I got my education at Polo. And Ralph says that too. He thinks of it like a school, for designers. And it absolutely was. It was unbelievable. So I am not glossing over this, but trying to keep it quick. But so I lived in New York for a while, but very shortly thereafter, because like, you know, I wasn't snowboarding. I didn't have a car at the time, not having God, this is going to sound terrible, but I had already had one vintage 911 already. And I'm like, if I didn't have that in my life, it was really a problem. So I was like, these old 911s used to be very obtainable. And I just loved the smell and the experience. And it was part of my DNA. Like I had to get out and rip roads. Like that whole thing about being real was inherent to my whole thing. You know, I didn't want to dress up like I was going to go for a drive or get in a race car. I want to go do that stuff, you know? Same was true for snowboarding. And I was blessed that the team there let me operate out of Boulder for many years. And so I worked remotely for Ralph Lauren for most of my time there. And saw a lot of LaGuardia. That was my trade-off, you know, and spent a lot of time away from my family. But in the end, I was working with still some of my favorite people in the world, getting a massive education, my dream job. And so there were trade-offs, you know, I had to sacrifice to keep the dream alive. So that was 5 years there, launched a couple of other internal brands. And then I just started to see that this carte blanche era that we'd had for 5 years was starting to shift, you know, the pendulum swings, and maybe you want to do lighter weight, lower cost product in the same DNA. And so I just knew that my skill set might not be necessary in the same way. And that's right around the time that Spyder showed up in Boulder. New CEO, new head of marketing, knew they had to turn the brand around. And here again, my former life catches up and my name gets thrown in the hat. And I was fortunate enough to land that job and run that team for 6 years or so, and had a fantastic run at Spyder until about 2015. I'll pause there in case you've got other questions.
Well, I think this is great. I just apologize that we are glossing over a lot. All of this deserves its own podcast because there's probably so many insights that you gained from each of those experiences.
Yeah. Well, the biggest one probably is I managed no one at Salomon. I managed 3 people at Ralph Lauren, and then my org chart had 25 people on it when I landed at Spyder. So They weren't all directs, but I'd never been responsible for so many humans, and so many people's livelihood, and so many people's expectations and hopes and dreams. It's so funny. I got to be careful. I started to get kind of emotional saying that. It's like that was a huge one, man. That was big to have to go from me, like to be honest, like, you know, a young dad, I've got to be worried about number one, to all of a sudden having to be worried about having to concern myself with so many other people was massive. That was heavy. And those were hard years. I mean, that was a big, big job.
Well, I don't know if that's I don't think I hear that from people in senior management often, like that dynamic of, you know, the weight. You hear the weight of leadership, or it's the loneliness, right? But I don't know if I've heard people get emotional necessarily about, man, the people that work for me are, you know, I'm responsible, you know, for leading this team in a direction where they're going to be taken care of, right? And they're going to be successful. And I don't know if I've really heard about it that way.
Well, I'm a terrible manager. I mean, I am such a humanistic person that this idea of being some cold, distant manager who's just like, I'm not great at that. I just on a public podcast, I just said I'm a terrible manager. I think I'm a very good mentor, but in the historical sense of having to be some distant leader, I spend 10 hours a day with these people, you know, right. And I loved my teams. I loved the people I worked with, great friends, people I totally admired who, you know, like I said, in many cases were like working their tails off to try to make things happen. I mean, how do you not start to like admire and like love the people you're around? So it's like, it's a weird dynamic, you know? So of course I gave a damn. Of course I wanted to see, you know, you're like in your mind, you're going, oh my God, please don't leave. And at the same time, you're like, go crush life, go be right. The best you can be, you know, but you have these periods where you're like, oh my God, nothing can happen to my team right now. You know, it's exhausting, but I don't know, maybe that's a great, I don't know if it's a great management style, but in terms of like wanting people to succeed and be great, that's where I came. It's not past tense. That's what I still do. I want people to go and crush it, because
Right.
I was given great opportunities. So I'm just paying, all I'm doing is paying it forward. It's not rocket science.
Right. Well, you're doing that here again today. So, paying it forward in a different way to the next generation of designers. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so from Spyder, you took one more, well, you have a couple more stops on your journey.
Well, the new leadership came in. It was time for a regime change. I left Spyder in 2015 and went, I just use the word trajectory. You think Salomon, Ralph Lauren, Spyder, Nike, got to be Nike. It's got to be at the time Under Armour, whatever, like that kind of thing. Like those were big players. But instead, I discovered this small brand. A colleague of mine from Salomon connected me with this small brand from San Francisco called Triple Aught Design, which is, primarily made in USA, direct consumer, weekly drops, crazy online community, crazy secondary market. I mean, holy moly, in one brand, everything we're talking about for the future of retail and the future of engagement and the future of product and the future of make and the future of like why we do things. I didn't know it at the time. I just saw a crazy cult following and some really cool people, and joined this brand. And I worked with Tad for I don't know, 3.5 years or so before the VF stint came up. But the important thing here is that it absolutely opened my eyes after 15 years of traditional wholesale. Triple Aught was my education in the new model. And it's completely changed my perspective on really everything I do. So that was the next big transition. And I'm still associated with the brand and still very close to that team and admire what they do.
Well, and then you mentioned, you go and work for VF, and this is after they have moved to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So hard to get into too many of the details there. A tough time to start at a new brand, a few months before COVID happens. And, I'll suffice to say it was a short stint that I loved and worked with amazing people and just had a tremendous experience there. Obviously they're having a very good run at the moment. The Supreme news was super exciting. I'm very excited for everyone over there, but it just wasn't at the time. I guess it wasn't meant to be. It was short but meaningful. Great people.
Well, and I know you worked on the innovation side of things, and that's probably has that been a theme for you throughout your careers? I mean, always kind of pushing, always trying to do things that are meaningful, impactful. I have to ask, because innovation is a word that gets thrown around all the time, and it doesn't really have a meaning. When you use it, when it's thrown around. So it's like sustainability, right? It's the same thing. What does that word mean to you? Innovation within a company?
Well, you're right in that even at Salomon, Polo, I don't know Spyder if we got any or not, but I've had a number of patents over the years, and like this whole concept of authenticity and wanting to, here again, like provide the consumer with something that they hadn't experienced before. And so hopefully their day on the mountain or on the trail or whatever is elevated by way of these ideas, It's not just a peer for peer, this brand is better than X brand. I don't think that way. And I don't like it when brands reward for that. Within design groups, the copy is not a word that's not in my vocabulary. So it's like I always wanted it to be like a solution. Not if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, I get that. But in some cases, there were ways there's always a way to improve something,
Mm-hmm.
And now, in terms of innovation, we got away with a lot there for a long time. For a while, it was how far can we go? How cool can we make this or whatever? And now it can't really be, or it shouldn't be that way. It has to be about how are we making this? What impact reduction can this approach have? As opposed to seeing just how far we can go. It shouldn't be a Formula One program all the time. That there's a place for that. We have to have that crazy cutting edge at whatever cost, progression. But the bigger picture, I think, has to tie into innovation for the sake of sustainability and coming at this consciously.
Right. I like how you describe that, innovation being more about rethinking the entire process, rethinking how product is made, or, whatever it might be. I think that that was a helpful description, because again, I imagine in each company, innovation has a different meaning. The roles are slightly different. So I thought that was really helpful. Um, what kind of led to your decision to kind of put your name, out there? I mean, your name is already out there, but to do that formally in terms of creating a business that carries your name. What I mean, you kind of alluded to some of this with VF, but what led to that decision of striking out? And we can get into some of, what's the difference been working for yourself versus working for a corporation that has shareholders. I'm sure there's a lot of differences, but what led
Yeah.
to some of those decisions?
Oh, I mean, I think it comes back to everything we talked about in the beginning. It's like life is short, when I'm sitting down with people and asking them about, or people are asking me, I should say, about careers. What should I do? How should, what do you, and doing mentorship type stuff. It's like, let's start with I don't like the term end game, but in some way, like, let's talk about end game a little bit first. Like, what do you want out of your life? What is the dream for you? If you know what that is, and not everyone does, but like, if you do, or if you've got any flutter of what the dream is, let's talk about the dream. And then we can start to come back from this, because I think my basic dream was to have my own brand and live somewhere where I could get outside and have adventures. It was always about the car, and it was always about having a racetrack, or these aspirational, like big dreams. Like, I want to have an old Porsche. I want to run on a racetrack. I want to be able to snowboard in good conditions, and live in a relatively safe place for my family, like pretty basic stuff. And so I started working back from that. It's like, okay, these incredible opportunities at Salomon, you don't say no to that. That was an incredible experience. I was on my own. I went into a company, best decision, best opportunity ever. There's no way I was going to say no to Polo. That was another experience. And like I said, another level of education. So like this investment in some cases, in some sacrifice, because it was hard to live in New York with a 2-year-old and a newborn. But you make these sacrifices, in the investment in the future. And then, Spyder was getting closer to the places and the way that I wanted to continue living, like Boulder was a nice place to live. And it's like, so it's just kind of keeping the dream alive, but all coming back to those tenets. Like, those were tenets that I set years before. And I was like, okay, is this in the realm or not? And it's not to say that I wouldn't drop everything if Tom Ford calls tomorrow. And go live in Italy for a few years or wherever. Sure, that would take me off the path, but I know the experiences would just be completely next level. And so, so you would make that sacrifice again. It's just funny because I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but the idea is that, like, I do like to start with what you want out of your life so that career doesn't become everything, and yet when there are times, when the times come up when career has to take precedent, weigh the experience, weigh the sacrifice, weigh it against your end game, and figure out if it's an investment you want to make or not.
Right. When Collier is that investment right now.
Well, it is. Yeah. Sorry.
What has the experience been like day to day? Working, rather than working with one brand, now you get the opportunity to work with a few brands at the same time. What is that like to be able to really pick, kind of along the lines of what you were just saying, right? Choose the projects that you're passionate about, choose the companies that align with your values. Has that been kind of a freeing experience for you?
Yeah, it has. And thank you for reminding me. I got on the big picture track a little bit on my last answer, but it's like, you're right. It has to do with being able to, well, if you're lucky enough to, like, I mean, for starters, you're beating the pavement. You're a salesperson. You're out there, like, drumming up business. Like, this stuff doesn't just, land on your plate. So it's like, there are aspects and major sacrifices to going out on my own. I just, I'm finally feeling like I'm really ready to go do it in a big way. And I feel like I'm not just I'm trying all the time, Chase. Like, for 15 years, I've been a soldier. I've been Luke, and I'm trying to move at least into a Ben Kenobi kind of like phase, and maybe Yoda someday, but like, it's not just about design anymore. Like I have enough experience in message and vision now to be able to be a strategic guide, as opposed to just, I know I can deliver good design. Like it's more just like, no, what's the bigger picture? Like where are we going with this relationship? Like it's that whole thing. So, so going out on my own, the thing that I missed in the last answer was it's the type of work that I want to do. And I'm not like trying to be spoiled or say I don't want to do that, but there are things I just don't really want to do anymore, or I know well enough now that it's like, man, that's not interesting. I did those things when I had to do them. I don't necessarily want to do them now. I want to be more creative. I want to be a strategist. I want to solve problems. So having the courage, I guess, if that's the right word now, to really go out on my own had to do with having had invested in, myself and my capability for the last couple of decades. I didn't know what I didn't know before, and now I'm developed enough to be able to really make a contribution to people and to brands and individuals in a meaningful way.
Right. It seems like that journey, it's interesting, the journey that you took, because you start by going out on your own, right? Putting out what you're passionate about, what you're interested in into the world. And then you land in the industry and have this incredible career arc. And then you come back to, okay, I'm working on things that I'm passionate about again. And not to say that you weren't passionate about what you were doing throughout your career, but it's interesting, full circle, that journey, right? Of being able to kind of choose what you're interested in again. It seems like a lot of our students are passionate about that, or interested in that journey for themselves. So with that said, I want to tease out what are, there's the glamour that comes with, working for yourself and all that. And, but what are the downsides for our students who think that it's all glamour?
Oh God, I was just going to say glamour. I don't know. I mean, the glamour for me is being able to, sort of plan my day without quite, so many meetings, or nowadays so many Zoom calls or whatever. Like that's glamorous. What is hard is, the absence of benefits, the absence of, whatever consistent pay, all of those things that come with, with a nice corporate job, for lack of a better term. It's like, those are all really nice things to have. And so those are big trade-offs. If you're going to embark on this, you really need to do the math, and my wife would be like, what are you talking about? And they're like, you don't do any of that stuff. But it's like, you need to prepare yourself for the absence of some of those presumed consistencies that a real job often brings, and those are really nice things. It's great to have good benefits. It's great to, to be part of a company's growth, at certain levels of management or what have you. It's like, those are really nice things. But, but depending on what you want to do with your day is when you have to kind of decide, if that's for you or not, And like I said earlier, investment in that time, in yourself, in understanding the inner workings of a company, any size company, is something I would definitely advise before just breaking out.
Right. Well, and making your mistakes on someone else's dime is helpful too, right? It's like, before putting all your eggs in one basket, and putting yourself on the line. I imagine it's really helpful to be able to go and, like you said, go work for a company, go make mistakes, go learn, go see how a company actually runs, see how product is made. You'll have so much more to offer. If your career arc is structured that way, right? Where you have all those learning experiences, and then you have something to offer later on. I imagine.
Well, it's good to have something on your CV too, when you're going out looking for investors to launch your dream,
Right.
like that's also helpful. I mean, I know there are a lot of people out there with great ideas. Finding people to fund them is another story altogether. And yeah, you can live off top ramen and grow and build something organically for 10 years, until it's ready for investment or whatever, or 5 years. And people do that, and that's rad, but like massive sacrifice, to just sort of put all the eggs in a brand launch kind of concept, but people do it and it's awesome.
Right. Right. Well, a couple more questions and we'll wrap up from, after those, but, um, from your perspective, looking back over your career as a self-taught designer, what are some of the advantages or disadvantages, that has brought to your career? Like, have you noticed anything that, you know, coming from the outside, being self-taught gave you some kind of advantage? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I came at it the like I said, there were some hard times there transitioning from snowboarder to designer because of the things I didn't know. And at the same time, as soon as I was in an organization where I could apply the ideas that were brand new, because I wasn't, hindered by history or anything like that, it was like, that's when that stuff started to really take hold.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's a great question. I've just always, like I said, tried to come at things in a totally unique way. And that's for the last 15, 20 years really. Now it's like I was saying earlier, we don't have any choice but to, so the
Mhm.
product that I'm working on right now with my own name on it finally is everything to do with reimagining the material sourcing process, the tailoring process that is created in 3D, sewn locally, like all of these aspects of, okay, I'm not trying to be Ralph anymore. Like, I'm trying to make a pure statement of what I believe. It may or may not be a business, but it's going to be a pure statement of what I believe is one way to go forward in this industry. And so that is very much still a part of my approach, is to not take anything as the way we have to do it, because God knows in apparel, that's nothing about that is true.
Right.
You might
Well,
be led to believe that that's true, but it's not necessarily true.
right. Well, maybe this is a good way to wrap things up. But what keeps you going, and what do you look forward to in the future?
Oh gosh. Like I said earlier, like the people piece has always been so important that I look forward to trying to create opportunity for others. So whether that is going to be finding new ways to create capability, like on the make side of things, like sewing, like what's going to be, or maybe it's not sewing. What's the new make, you know? Like, and what do we do even in this country to find new ways to wrap bodies in fabric that aren't necessarily related to the old ways of doing that?
Mhm.
Like, yes, we're gonna have to tailor material, we're gonna have to cut material, but how we put things together might not require sewing capability. Sewing is terrible. I mean, we all know, all of you are laughing right now who sew. You're like, yeah, it's terrible. I don't want to, like sewing it's hard. It's not terrible. Sometimes it's terrible. But like, there's a reason we don't have manufacturing in this country anymore. And that's probably the reason, it's like, that is hard. And there's a brain trust that's aged out, and there's a desire to sew that might not be there anymore. So how do we find cool new ways to make things? These are the kinds of things that I'm like up in the middle of the night thinking about. But in the end, I think it has to do with creating opportunity and like finding ways to like help people have some of the great experiences I've had, even though I think those experiences are going to be totally different. And I hope they are. And in many cases, they need to be.
Right. Well, JJ, how do people stay in touch with you and everything that you're working on here in the future? Because you've got a lot coming down the pipeline. How's the best way to stay in touch?
Yeah, Collier Brands, one word, on Instagram. And then that's the same for my website, and my contact information is on there as
That's
well.
perfect.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, you've been generous with your time. We went well over the 45 minutes that I said we'd take,
Great. Oh,
but
you're so fun.
it was fun, and I appreciate you taking time. I learned a lot, and I think this is going to be really valuable for students and anyone else who listens. You've have contributed so much to the industry, and more to come. Right? Like there's a whole nother couple chapters.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes next for you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, when we first met, and I'm so impressed by your program up there. And I just feel like you guys have really got a feeling for what's happening and what's going to happen. And I'm happy to have been a part of it. So thank you so much.
Well, like you said, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Very
So I think that's the key. So again, thank you for taking the time.